I think you have to make some mistakes to learn how your body reacts and how your mind reacts to the later parts of race. So I think mistakes are an inevitable part of the process of learning to be an ultra runner.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, whose favorite animal is the koala, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 21 of the Running for Real podcast. I am so excited that you are here. If this is your first time listening, thank you so much for checking in. I'm glad that you are listening to the Running for Real podcast. And for those of you who have been listening for a while, who have been sharing on your Facebook pages and your groups, with friends, tagging me on Instagram, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It makes me so happy to know that all this hard work that I do is paying off. So thank you so much. Last week, we talked to Steve Jones. If you haven't heard of Steve Jones, or if you didn't listen to that episode last week, you need to go back and listen to it. Steve is just amazing. He, was the world champion, set the world record in his first marathon. He is, very honest and real, doesn't have anything to hide, and just really great perspective on how he sees running, even as a professional at the very top level. Steve actually shares a story that he's never shared before about going to the bathroom during a race, during the London Marathon, which he went on to win. So if you missed that one, make sure you go check it out because it's definitely worth a listen. So today we have the two people behind iRunFar, which is the kind of go-to trail and ultra marathon website. It's grown hugely in popularity, has become kind of the go-to place for anyone who wants information with interviews, pre and post. It's got all kinds of services, gear reviews, all kinds of stuff. But these two really make sure to make it humble and real and just giving you the information you actually want rather than just pumping you up with a load of useless information. So I have Meghan Hicks and Bryon Powell on the show today. You're really going to enjoy getting to know them, their backgrounds as individuals, and then just kind of how iRunFar developed. So after a quick word from our sponsor, I will be right to the interview. Technology has come a long way, and later in the show, you're going to get to meet one of the best advances for running I've ever seen, and you're going to love her. If you have to train on your own a lot, like I did, V will be just what you need. Check out getvi.com for more information. Bryon, Meghan, welcome to the Running for Real podcast. I am really excited that you are here. I've been wanting to set this one up for years, and when I finally plucked up the courage to email you both, I managed to get both of you in one call, which makes me even happier. So welcome to the show, and thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, Tina, thank you for having us.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about this. And we're going to kind of talk about the website itself, iRunFar. You're known for being the go-to ultra and trail running website. And, you talk about shoes, running gear, races, services, all kinds of things. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But as I wanted to kind of let the listeners get to know you guys a bit more first. So, Bryon, we'll start with you. Firstly, you're the editor-in-chief for iRunFar, but you quit your job as an attorney and moved to Yosemite. So that in itself is a pretty good story, I would imagine. Not many people would do that. So maybe could you tell us maybe how you reached that point or what kind of led to that decision?
Yeah, I guess after university, I went to Washington, D.C. for 9 years, working at law firms before, during, and after law school. And once I became an attorney, I didn't have a whole lot of personal satisfaction with that, despite being in a field I enjoyed. And just had this little personal running blog on the side that started to grow and started to become more of an information source than just a personal blog. And after meeting Meghan, we were at the Marathon des Sables in Morocco together, and kind of was a week away from the day-to-day life, and thought about my life and what I wanted to do with it that whole time. And on the flight back, I asked Meghan if she'd mind if I quit my job and moved in with her outside of Yosemite. And she was amenable to that. And in May 2009, iRunFar became my full-time job.
Wow. So at that point, were you making any money from it, or was that just something that you kind of had a gut feeling that it could go somewhere and you were at the point where you wanted to kind of chase that satisfaction, I guess, but even if it did mean that you were taking a bit of a risk?
Oh, there was a lot of risk. At the moment, when I quit my job, I had $100 a month coaching client. So there wasn't a whole lot of income. And I actually didn't add advertising to the website for a year and a half after I was doing it full time. So there was a lot of risk and a lot of living lightly. I mean, I knew it. I mean, it's not like I, burned my attorney's license. I maintained my professional licensure. And, if at 1 year it was clear there was no way this was ever going to work, okay, I gave it a go. And if at 2 years it was unsustainable, sort of the same thing, I could have gone back to being an attorney or, some other professional job. But I wanted to give it a year or two at least to see if I could find some way to make it work. And whether that was going to be coaching or advertising, or I was doing a lot of freelance writing for publications. I don't know if I was going to put on races or running tours, or who knew. I had a whole long list of, well, how do we make all this fly?
Yeah.
And
No, that's great. And what did just curious, what did your friends and family think about you doing this? Did they think you were nuts?
Somehow, no.
Oh,
because
wow.
I went into it very intentionally. Not that I had a financial business plan or something, but I had a parachute, and I was like, I'm going to go out there and live on nothing and see if this, if I can follow my passion. And if I don't, or if it doesn't work out, no harm done. You know? So I think they were all behind me, and it really did surprise me that, no parent or grandparent or, uncle or whatever was like, Bryon, you're crazy for doing this. But no.
It might
So
be
go for it.
something that, people, it might have just struck that nerve with everyone where it's something like chasing your passion, like you mentioned, was that thing that everyone always kind of wants to do, but most people don't have the courage to do it. So maybe they admired you and kind of thought, you know what, I wish I'd done that or something like that. So that's great.
All of my family was the exact opposite. My father worked for AT&T and then Verizon and all, sort of worked for the phone company until high school to retirement. My mom was a school teacher in the same school district. My grandparents worked at the same companies. My uncle, same law firm since the early 80s, like all these things, like, and happy with what they did. But yeah, I think they did see that as a, here's somebody stepping out of the norm, and why not?
And then, so what did make it work? What things did you have kind of a plan of where you wanted to, which things you wanted to focus on, or was it just kind of a, let's see what happens?
It was totally let's see what happens. And, I was going to, just write good articles about trail and ultra running and, see where that took me. Again, I kind of had a list of all these different options I could try to sort of make ends meet financially. And initially that was coaching was my main income stream with some freelance writing on the side. And then that switched to a little bit of freelance writing and sort of advertising and marketing partnerships. And then mostly that. And for a while there was a store, like a third party store with, Salomon gear and Montrail shoes and all that. And it's constantly evolved. And that's been a fun and challenging path.
Yeah. And here we are today, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But first I want to go on to Meghan. And, you've got a lot of impressive results to your name, from winning races, Marathon des Sables in 2013, have a thing about 2016, the Nolan's 14 route, setting the women's fastest known time. And you've run over 50 events, which blows my mind. Although I'm sure maybe in the ultra and trail running world, maybe that's quite commonplace. But to me, that seemed like a lot. But either way, you're very experienced. And maybe I thought you could tell us a bit about, as you go through all these events and, you've had success, you've done a lot of events, do you find that you keep getting better with each event? Or is it something that, no matter how experienced you get, it still kind of keeps surprising you and keeps tripping you up and you learn things all the time? I just was curious, as someone who has competed that many events, what was your take on that?
Well, I think one of the funnest parts about trail and ultra running is that it's a sport that requires both a fit body, but also a wise mind. And I don't think that as the years go on, I necessarily perform better just because I've done events. I think I have to be fit in order to physically perform well. But the more events you do, the wiser you do get. And you get to see that sometimes wisdom can surmount physical fitness. But you're never going to be fast unless you run fast, or you're never going to be able to, run far-ish unless you practice running far-ish to some extent. So you do have to train to perform well. But for me, one of the funnest challenges and one of the things that keeps me at it is the continuous learning path, the fact that wisdom does get you pretty far down the trail.
No, that's great. And I think that's kind of, I guess, what you would expect if you really thought about it, that you are going to get wiser, especially with events like that where you kind of learn to understand your body. I talked to Magda Boulay a few months ago, and she was kind of saying the same thing, that you learn to understand which things you can push through and when to back off and when to keep going. So kind of backs up what you were saying there. And were you always a trail and ultra girl, or did you start on the roads or start with cross country, or how did you begin with that?
I did high school track and field, and I also played tennis in high school and collegiately. But after college, there's not really that much you can do with tennis unless you want to sort of stay near cities and get into sort of, like city competitive tennis. Running was an easier habit to take out and about. So I did a lot of road running for, I'd say, from graduating from university through my mid-20s, and then discovered trail running, that the sport actually existed. I didn't know it existed for a while. I think in 2004, I met a woman who sort of self-identified as a trail runner, and I was so intrigued about, hey, that's a sport I've never heard of. Tell me more. And it was a slippery slope. It didn't take long to jump on that bandwagon.
And for the both of you, how much of a difference have you seen with the amount of exposure that ultra and trail running has seen? Because I'd imagine both of you kind of being in it early, and with the website kind of coming together at the beginning, you were kind of the leaders here because there weren't that many people doing it. Would you both say you have seen a huge explosion in recent years, or has it kind of been a gradual increase year by year?
I think there was a pretty big explosion, especially, I think for a long time there's been trail running, especially in the US. It's a much more established sport, I feel like. And but with like ultra running, there was a huge growth in the mid to late part of the first decade of the millennium, and then continuing on a little bit past that. Now I think it's kind of gone more into a plateau, slow growth kind of stage. But there was definitely a boom in the Dean Karnazes, ultra marathon man, born to run kind of era.
Yeah.
And I think people were kind of looking for a new challenge, and ultra running became that challenge.
Makes total sense. And where do you both, maybe Meghan, you could answer first, and then I'd love to hear Bryon as well. Where would you see it going ultimately? Like, do you see it becoming mainstream enough, like road running, or do you not even want it to go that way because, it'll kind of take a lot of the authenticity and, I don't know, truth about it away?
I think certainly in our country here in the US, the sports growth will be limited by the size, the number of participants that races can handle. Our federal agencies, which govern most of the lands that trail races happen in, put limits on the number of people who can run these races. And so there are very few events where there can be more than a couple hundred people. So there's that limitation that, at least here in America, we're never going to have these massive multi-thousand person events that we see at road marathons, half marathons, sometimes, things like the Boulder 10K. So there's that. I think ultra running itself, like the idea of running 100 miles, there's a certain limiting aspect to that a lot of people can try shorter distance or trail racing, 50Ks, but I don't think a lot of people are going to regularly run 100 miles as compared to people who run road marathons.
Yeah.
I think the concept of trail and ultra running in Europe could potentially be different in the future because they don't have land agencies that put governance on the number of people who can run races. And so there are a lot of races in Europe that can have 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people, 6,000 people across a whole weekend of events. And that, when you add that up, that adds up to, a road marathon event.
Sure.
Yeah. What is in the future of trail and ultra running? I don't exactly know, but I do think Bryon is right on point in saying that I think at the moment we're in we're a couple years into a plateau phase in terms of our growth, and whether we're going to have another huge step up in a couple of years or whether we're going to stay on this plateau for a while. I don't think we know the answer.
And Bryon, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't see another in the U.S. There's some countries around the world that are experiencing huge growth in trail or ultra running at the moment. I kind of see a slow progression here in the U.S. for the foreseeable future. Although I'm looking out at Leadville right now, and if they ever come out with that Born to Run movie, I can imagine there being another quick infusion of a few tens of thousands. Because it's been talked about for at least half a decade now, and it hasn't happened. But I don't. But you never know when that spark or that moment is going to come. It's not there right now. Yeah, and I'm actually totally okay with that. We have a great community, and it's not quite as intimate as it used to be, but it's still enough continuity in the ultra running community that many of the values have been preserved, and that there's sort of guidance for those coming into the sport, both information wise and ethics and community spirit wise.
Absolutely.
To maintain that to some extent. And I greatly value that. Just having explosive growth for explosive growth's sake, I don't think it does anything for the sport.
No, that's so true. And I definitely, as an outsider, I do intend on doing ultras and trails when I come back to running someday. But for now, I definitely, as an outsider, I get that vibe as well. So that's good to hear you back it up as well. So let's talk about iRunFar a little bit more. You know, I mentioned at the beginning what kind of website it is, but you've become also not just, you know, for information and reviews and services and things, you've also become kind of a place where people love to go watch the pre and post race interviews for these bigger races. And I remember watching quite a few of them after Western States, and I'm not even, you know, like I said, I'm not yet an ultra runner. But I just found them really interesting. And I wondered if I'd love to hear both of your opinions on this. If you had any thoughts on what it is about watching those pre and post race videos that make them so appealing, you know, almost more than the race videos themselves. Like, is it because you don't get to see the race as much as you would in, you know, like a road race, or is it just there's something else about it?
I wish I knew. I have no idea. Meghan, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, one of the things that we consciously do with pre and post race interviews is we try to keep them low key and conversational. Like, for instance, I've been doing this for 8 years now, and we only added microphones to our interviews this year because we wanted to keep them feeling like a couple people having a conversation. Yeah. You know, intimate and organic. We don't always succeed with that, but that's something that we do consciously try. And I think when we are successful, it really is like a kind of a window in a very human experience. You know, runners kind of let their guards down, you know, tell these real stories of sometimes triumph and sometimes tragedy and racing aspect, true human tragedy, but racing tragedy. And yeah, kind of the organic, low-key aspect that we try to do helps. I mean, I do think that the ultra marathon experience lends itself to a good story. I mean, these things last all day. Sometimes you see all kinds of weather. You get sick, you get well again. Yeah, the ultra marathon experience is a very human experience.
Yeah, actually, that's pretty much what I was thinking when I was thinking up of this question. And maybe I should have given you guys a bit more warning that I was going to ask it, as it is quite a tricky one, I guess. But yeah, the thing I was thinking is, yeah, you get to see that like human side of people before the race. You get to see their confidence through their body language. You know, how do they feel about the race? Do they, you know, I think I could imagine a lot of people listening love to kind of look at videos and see if they can guess who's going to fare based on the way they're looking before. And, you know, you can compare it to the mood afterwards to see if people are, you know, happy, or if you can tell that they might be a little bit deflated, even though they're saying it was okay. So that's exactly what I was thinking with that. But I just wondered if you had, you know, either of you had any other opinions on that. And Bryon, do you have anything else you wanted to say? Or
no, I mean, it's just we try to make it a real personal and personable experience. Both.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, the whole reason not behind a mic was there are plenty of people. There's the Killian Jornets and the Francois Dehanes and Anna Frost who've done tons of interviews and are completely comfortable with it. But there's so many people in the sport that have never been in front of a microphone before. So like, I don't know, I always, when talking to somebody who I've not interviewed before, say, hey, the camera's not here. We're just two runners having a discussion about running.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to keep it as.
Yeah. No, that definitely comes across. So then let's talk about the site a little bit more. If someone had told you both, what year did you say you moved? 2007, was it, Bryon?
2009.
2009. Yeah. So if someone had told you both when, you moved over to Yosemite, moved in with Meghan, did you expect it to grow the way that it did? Had you known back then that it would be as big as it was now, would you have believed it? Did you kind of see that there was a spark of something exciting? Or is this every day you kind of almost have to pinch yourself to see how big of an impact it has?
It's definitely the pinch yourself scenario, because I think when I looked back, and this was some years ago, I looked back, probably 3 or 4 years into doing iRunFar full time. I looked back and iRunFar was receiving, 200 viewers a day when I quit my job. And I'm like, how did I do that? What was I thinking? This is ridiculous. And then by that time, iRunFar, was a couple thousand page views a day. And so it had grown a huge amount. And I was like, sort of working right now. How could it have possibly worked in the past? So yeah, I could not have envisioned, how widely read it would become, or how
absolutely
how broadly read it is in terms of around the world. Yeah,
no, it's amazing, and everyone I talk to who's even remotely or slightly involved in the trail and ultra world is on iRunFar, checking it often, and it's definitely, I think, well, in my opinion, the go-to source, which is why I wanted you guys on here so bad. Meghan, do you have anything to add?
Well, that's very kind of you to say. Thank you so much. I was a bit of an outsider to iRunFar for the first couple of years because it was Bryon's singular project, and I still had a job working in Yosemite National Park. And to be quite honest, the first couple of years, Bryon was making almost no money, but I could see how quickly it was taking off. So I kind of had an inkling that it was going to stick. I didn't know what form it would stick in, but yeah, as an outsider looking in those first couple of years, you could see that Bryon was hitting hitting something that people were looking for.
So what kind of indicators, just curious, did you see with regards to that gave you that opinion? Was there anything like just the way people were responding and appreciating it?
Yeah, back in those days, iRunFar still has a pretty community feel to the comments people make to the articles. But, there were certain articles that the overall readership of iRunFar was quite low, but Bryon would write these articles that would get 150 comments. And they weren't articles that were trying to achieve virality or to get attention or to cause debate, but it was, some sort of service or learning aspect that just hit a nerve that information wasn't previously available and people wanted it, and then they wanted to also talk about it. So I'd say comments to some of the articles to the website were a good indicator. And then when Bryon first started experimenting with live race coverage, people loved that instantly. Like it was like turning on a switch, basically.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. And then so Bryon, maybe tell us a bit about the kind of evolution of iRunFar, where it started with what you first started doing and, where you're at now, what you offer.
Yeah, I mean, it literally started off as me publishing a personal running blog. It was, here's my race report, or here's what my training was this week. And eventually I just saw that I'd kind of thought about it for a while, but there wasn't a whole lot of information online about ultra running. So I wanted to spread that and started focusing what I was writing about on sort of informational aspects of the sport in addition to what I was up to. And eventually I was publishing on a regular schedule, and that was kind of something I committed to early on, and just have always wanted a sort of magazine's mix of content. I mean, during some big races, there's a lot of coverage of that particular race on the website, but even during those times, trying to maintain gear reviews and instructional articles and editorial content, something that's very important to me. For me, the race coverage thing is some sort of anomaly that I never planned for. And it just kind of did it like once before I went full time in Virginia, just for a local race that I was part of, like my club's race, but never really thought about it again. And then I was at the North Face 50 in 2009, was signed up, dressed that morning, and was like, my Achilles are bothering me. And I have been for a while. and I just don't want to risk not being able to run through the winter. So I decided I'm just not going to run. And since I'm here, I might as well share some updates on Twitter, and kind of went from there. And it's funny, like Meghan kind of maybe could see where things were going, or saw that race coverage was kind of instantly adopted in the community. But on the other hand, the level of engagement and response from, say, Western States this year and Hard Rock this year and a couple other events has been far and away more than I would have even imagined last year. So, I mean, sometimes you can be doing something for years and years and years, and then it just catches on in a whole new way at a whole new level. And that's been a fun surprise at times. You just never know.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then, so what would you say for someone who maybe just has their own personal blog and they're at that first point that you mentioned where they have maybe 200 people looking a day? Would you say to just try lots of different things, or would you say to pick an area and stick to it and just...
I mean, I would say, yes, stick to a niche. I mean, like, I guess I early on was writing some articles that were instructional about the sport, and I kind of like gear. So I had a bunch of gear reviews that I thought I did a good job with, and sort of stuck to those areas. And then it was only over time that really diversified through adding regular columnists. So just, if you're going to do something solo, stick to not only what you know best, what you enjoy the best. Because there's really no point in just trying to become something if it's not what excites you or what interests you. There's just, it's hard enough to make a go of it if you are super passionate about it. So just follow that lead.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. All right, so I want to pick both of your brains a bit on, your both experiences I've mentioned so far. You've probably learned a lot from, some of the best in the world, interviewing them, your own running, both of you, columns, research, all kinds of things. So maybe I thought if you could each give us 3 tips for listeners who think they would like to try an ultra or a trail race within the next year. So they've got one in mind, they're thinking about signing up, and just before they start, what 3 things would you like to tell them? So maybe Meghan, you could start.
Oh gosh, that's a great question. 3, just 3. Yep. Well, I'd say if you're thinking about something, I'd say really commit to it and use your loved ones and the people who surround you to help you commit. It's not a full-time job to train for an ultra marathon. A lot of people, including a lot of busy people, run ultras successfully. But you do need a little bit of time to run each day, and you do need to do a long run each week, and you do need to commit to that process. And so I think having that mental commitment, and then having sort of your peers around you supporting you in that, and sort of being your person to lean on when maybe your own commitment is wavering a little bit in the hard times. So I'd say that. I'd say nutrition is an underlooked component of successful ultras. It's also the hardest part to nail, but practice really does make perfect when it comes to nutrition. So in your training leading up to your ultra, practice eating foods to see what goes down well, what energizes you, and what gets you feeling the best at the end of your long runs. So I'd say that would be my tip number 2. And tip number 3 would be to pick something that just really lights your fire. Like, this has to be fun. So pick a race that requires you to run trails that are interesting to you, or run routes that really light you up, that, on the days where your body's feeling tired, your mind is still really into it. Yeah, find a race that you're passionate and excited about.
Okay, that's helpful. And just a question you said about nutrition. I was kind of surprised to hear you say that. And with my personal running background, I know how important nutrition is. But I don't know if it's just me that's been given this kind of vibe. But because of some of the options that are available at some of the stations for ultra running, it, to me, seemed a lot like you just kind of get down what you can. It doesn't really matter. So you would say that's not the case. Like, people do, even though there are things offered, like beer, or like I've heard of like bacon and things like offered, you do still have to kind of make sure that you are testing them out, and you have to make sure that it doesn't necessarily have to be just you get a free pass to have whatever you want at those stations.
I think that there are a few people out there who, and gosh, these people I envy, who have like iron guts. They can put whatever into it, running in whatever kind of heat, whatever kind of pace. They can put what sounds good into their mouth and their stomach digests it.
Mm-hmm.
Those people are very lucky, but not everybody's like that. I mean, nutrition and the stomach is really like everybody is different. And it's just sort of a trial and error process. I remember early in my trail running life, I ran the Bridger Ridge Run, which is a beautiful mountain race in Montana. And I had heard about this nutrition product that I was really excited about, but I had never tried it before. But I tried it during this race, and I spent my entire time on this beautiful Bridger Ridge. Yeah, like projectile vomiting. It went on for hours. So nutrition is a trial and error thing, and it's a true study of one. If you can get down those potato chips and that bacon at an ultramarathon aid station, consider yourself really lucky.
Well, before we ask your tips, Bryon, what would you say about nutrition? Unless that was going to be one of your tips.
I don't know. The last 100 I ran, I drank 3 beers, had about 24 Scotch eggs, and a big plate of chips, aka fries, if you're in the U.S. So
you are one of those with an iron stomach.
Most of the time, fortunately. Yeah. I don't follow a strict nutritional plan, especially in terms of balance of this, carbohydrate versus that carbohydrate or protein intake. For me, it's what I can handle and what I want to eat.
Yeah.
The more you can fuel, the better. And that just varies person by person, distance by distance, and, day by day. And I just kind of play it by ear. And I know some things that do work well and don't work as well for myself, but I think experimenting is a key to that. And
so do you practice fueling, or you do just kind of wing it?
I practice not fueling. I pretty much go for quite literally 6, 8, 10-hour runs and have like 100 or 200 calories.
Okay.
So
maybe if someone was going to do a first ultra, they can use that as a test to see if they have an iron stomach or not. And then if you don't, then for the rest of your life, you better practice like Meghan says.
And during a race, I eat. In training, I don't eat. I don't train a lot with food, but I certainly do race with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And Bryon, what are your 3 tips?
Well, one of them was also Meghan's final tip. So yeah, follow your passion. Something that's just going to keep you motivated from the beginning of your training through the end of your race. It's got to be something you enjoy. Just because something is famous, if it's going to be a miserable experience for you, like don't make that your first ultra. Like choose something that's really just lights your fire from start to finish. I think patience in training is super important to really start your lead up, your build up. I mean, if I have a big race, and this is having done lots of hundreds before and lots of other ultra marathons, I still want to be starting to build my base 6 months out. And I think that's a really good starting point if you've not run ultras before. Like have some running fitness and then really start committing yourself half a year out.
Okay.
But also not to get overly concerned if your shin's bothering you and you have to take a couple of days off. Be patient. Like let yourself recover and take the long view rather than, this training plan in a book says I need to get my 15-miler in today. If you're burnt out or have a little injury, recover. You have plenty of time.
Okay. Very helpful.
And then, on race day itself, like, I guess on long training runs as well, just go out slower than you think you should. Always, every time. And when you think you're going slow enough, go a little bit slower. Both, it just preserves your energy levels and everything else for the race. But if you can actually start, whether you're not accelerating, but if you can feel good and catch people and enjoy the second half of an ultra marathon, which you most definitely can, it's far more enjoyable to do that than to suffer for the last 2/3 or half of a race, which can happen even in the best laid plans, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah. So that's one thing I was going to say. So you've given us that advice, and when it comes to, you both have spoken to a lot of professionals and a lot of the best in the business here. Do you see them making a lot of the same mistakes, kind of the things you said to avoid maybe early on when they first join the ultra world? Or is it something that, the top levels seem to mostly manage to skate around those new issues?
I think I see as many or more issues on the sort of front of the pack as I do in those further back, just because a lot of people are going to go for that win or go for that podium position, and it leads to them not going out easy enough and making a sustained effort, or not being patient in terms of their long-term view of ultra running. They'll, have a magical summer of training or maybe 2 years, and then we never hear from them again because they did far too much.
Could definitely
Meghan?
see it.
I guess I'd say with ultra marathon running, especially the longer races, I think you have to make some mistakes to learn sort of how things work and how your body reacts and how your mind reacts to the later parts of race. So I think mistakes are an inevitable part of the process of learning to be an ultra runner. But really the key is to not make the same mistake twice. To make that mistake, whether it's in training or in a race, to see that it was a mistake, to learn from it, and to, improve yourself next time. If it's not to go faster, it's to feel better. If you're not gunning for your fastest time, but you are looking to get to the finish line and feel as good as you can during it, practicing being a learner is a really fun aspect of being an ultra runner, like always being a student of the sport.
Okay. And then do you feel like you both reached a point where you felt like you got it? Like, with marathons, they say, I think it's 6 or 7 once you have, it takes 6 or 7 before you truly understand. Would you say there is a barrier or a number like that with trail and ultras, or is it you can maybe think you've reached that point, but then, maybe 10 events later you make that mistake again, or what would be your thoughts? So,
gosh, that's a good question. I don't know if there is a magic number for ultras. I've never thought about that. I don't think I nail it every time. I mean, if you haven't run 100 miles in a few years, you kind of forget how things feel. Like the way you feel at mile 80 is not a replicable circumstance in training or in any other race. You have to go there, be there, and then learn how to deal with that. So if you haven't done that in a couple of years, it can feel, I don't know, for me, unfamiliar again. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a great answer to that question. That's sort of one of the beauties is that, if you run a 100K race on this type of trail or in this type of climate, 100 kilometers in another type of trail, another type of climate, is going to be a totally different experience. Yeah, so some circumstance you just can't replicate over and over again.
That makes sense.
I mean, I think there's a general just downward, if you're being a student of the sport and being patient and persistent in your training over the years, there's just a downward trend. There can't be an elimination of error or just bad circumstance or fatigue or what have you in an ultramarathon. It's going to happen sometimes to everybody. And it's just that it's going to happen less likely, or you're going to be able to figure out the situation with the skills you've learned over the years and really address those situations or mitigate them. And maybe the total blow up rate is 1 in 2 your first year. And then by year 5, it's 1 in 5 or something. I don't know. But it's never going to be, you're never going to be flawless.
No, that makes sense. And then, so do you guys think that everyone should, at some point, if they're a runner, try and do an ultra marathon? Or is it something that, like with marathons, people have been like, oh, you're only a real runner when you've run a marathon, so everyone kind of goes for the marathon. But do you think with ultra marathons, it's something that you don't have to do it? Like, it's not, some people it's just not going to be for them, so it's not even worth trying for it. I'm just thinking about people listening who are thinking, oh, I don't know if ultra running is for me. Would you say to try one just to kind of see what you think of it? Or is it something that you have to kind of have that desire to actually want to do it before you try?
I mean, I wouldn't encourage somebody to do it who doesn't want to. I mean, you have to want to be outside for a while to enjoy the outdoors, whether that's on a road ultra marathon or not, and to enjoy the training. I think people who might not be sure it's for them, maybe give it a shot. But if you're like, no, this is just not something that interests me at all, there's no inherent reason to have to try an ultra marathon. Like, people could enjoy racing 5 and 10Ks their entire life and still challenge them to their hometown 10K that's run every April and try to run their best time. And that's perfectly awesome. Like, keep doing it. If you're running, and do what floats your boat. Like, there's I actually get kind of annoyed when people say this type of running is the true trail running, or this is it's only ultra marathons that matter. It has to be the most technical terrain, or it has to be the fastest terrain. I mean, just do what you enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Meghan, would you add anything?
I would say if you're listening to this and you are a runner of some sort, or somebody who practices a sport, and you're interested in a race, I would encourage you to try a trail race.
Yeah.
There are loads of trail races that are not ultra distance. In fact, there are whole trail races and race series out there that are put on to welcome road runners into trail running gradually.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage people, if you have any curiosity to try a trail race, try a shorter distance one. Just see what it's like to, run through the trees, run over rocks, to challenge yourself in a new and invigorating way.
Okay.
Give trails a try, but it doesn't necessarily have to be ultras.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. All right. And then do you both have a favorite race? Just curious. Is there one that kind of sticks out in your mind that, I don't know if it's going to be the same one that your most enjoyable race?
I think it might be.
It is? Go
Hey,
on then,
Meghan, how about the Hard Rock 100?
Do you like the Hard Rock 100, Bryon?
Yeah, I kind of like that one.
Yeah, me too.
Literally 6 inches from the metal that's hanging from my car rear view mirror. So
you kind of have to say that one as it's right.
Yeah, no, it's true.
And Meghan, you're the same?
Yeah, it's a very special race. It's run through a remote mountain range. It requires a lot of sort of independence, and it's tough. It's a trial of both body and psychology.
Okay. All right. Great. I will put links in the show notes for everyone to check out, so you can go see if that's something you want to do someday, or maybe sign up now. All right. One more area that I wanted to cover was reviews. So I'm sure you both know by now, and I definitely know this as well, that runners we're very trusting of others' recommendations. But you guys kind of differ in that other websites give everything. This is every product on the market. This is what I think of each one. But you don't do that. And maybe firstly, you could explain why you don't, review everything. What is your reasoning for just sharing the ones that you like the most?
This question is all you, Bryon.
Well, I think the reason we don't do the review everything method is because, having talked to magazine editors who review everything, it's simply so that they can solicit every product manufacturer for advertising. That's the reason. And I'm pretty skeptical about that kind of stuff, but yeah. I mean, I've heard it firsthand. And it's just, if we want to review products in depth and give more than a sentence or two, that's just a cursory mention of the shoe. Like, people need to put lots of miles in the shoe, and we do that. And there's tons of decent shoes out there. Like, if you go to just your general outdoor store in whatever country you're in, you go to the shelf, there's going to be okay trail shoes there. And we try to highlight, have our reviewers write about the shoes they like the most. Like, because they could write 10 reviews about okay shoes that they just think are okay, or one about a shoe that they're really passionate about. And I'd rather hear about what's totally lighting someone's fire right now than just what's totally okay, but unexceptional.
Okay, that's helpful. Meghan, would you add anything? No, Bryon sort of heads up and leads the review of the website. But yeah, I think it's bandwidth of our reviewers. We can't put, 10 shoes in front of them a month and expect them to tell good stories and run miles in each of them. So we'd rather have them put themselves in the shoes that they feel the best in and read them through the real paces. Okay.
And we totally give them, they get far more shoes or other pieces of gear than they ever write about. And it's, if they take 3 runs and they're just shrug their shoulders, that's okay. Okay, then they move on to the next thing and try it. So
they have a pretty sweet deal anyway, so they're not going to complain. And then as shoes and clothing is so important for trail and ultra races, what would be your single best piece of advice to runners as they are selecting shoes, clothing, what they're going to wear to keep their hydration? What would you say is the most important thing?
Experiment and find what works best for you. I was never a minimalist runner when that was all the craze. I ran marathons in my road trainers because I thought road flats were too risky. And now I run the Hard Rock 100 in road racing flats because they work for me in many different ways. And it's unconventional, but it's something that totally works for me. And that's through experimentation and not having to go with what the norm is or what quote unquote is the best at this moment. So
then
experiment.
Just related to that. So let's say someone, goes online and they see all these different products they could choose and they say, okay, I want to see what works best for me. Is it literally a case of you have to buy a few things and try them out? Or is there a way of figuring out, okay, well, this one might work well for me because I like this, which is kind of similar. Is there any other little hacks that people can do related to that?
I mean, if you're coming from, say, a road racing or a road running background, like you can take some of the qualities you liked from road shoes and move them forward. Whether you like lighter shoes for all of your running, then you can find a lighter pair of trail shoes. If you like more or less heel to toe drop, find a trail shoe that's similar. Okay. There's a lot of parallels.
Okay.
And look toward those.
Yep, that's helpful. All right. And Meghan?
I guess for clothing, I guess my biggest little hack would be think about layers. So you can always add and subtract. If you're going to be out there for a few hours, you could encounter sun, rain, and everything in between. So I always think about layers. In terms of a hydration pack, consider a hydration pack that looks like a vest. A lot of different companies are offering those right now, and they're just so comfortable compared to your traditional hydration vest.
Okay.
And in terms of shoes, one of the beauties of shoes is that you can run on trails or you can run ultras wearing any kind of shoe. But if you're going to make any adjustment or buy a trail shoe that feels good on your foot and that has good traction on the bottom that will help you stay attached to the ground, whether it's mud, water, hard packed trail, sand, whatever.
Okay. And then with hydration packs, just because I know a lot of my audience have asked about hydration packs in the past, which one do each of you recommend or use?
I use a couple, but the ones that I lean on most heavily are the hydration vests made by Ultimate Direction.
Okay.
They allow you to carry a reservoir in the back or bottles in the front, and they have all kinds of pocket divisions for food, your cell phone, your car key, garbage, whatever you're going to need on the trail. They've got all kinds of lovely little pockets to help you divide things up and carry stuff comfortably on the front and the back of your body.
Okay. All right.
And if I go longer, I like to use an Ultimate Direction running pack vest. But most of the time, almost all of my runs, I just wear a simple waist pack and I don't carry much, don't use much. So for me, that takes care of anything under than 20 miles.
Okay.
I just go with a little waist pack.
Okay. All right. Okay, we're just going to take a moment to thank our sponsor, and then I'll be back with the Running for Real 4. Catching up with friends on a run is one of the best feelings a runner can experience. The miles fly by, you feel good, and it just becomes so much easier to keep going. They push you to be better, and you push them to be better. But for most of us, those runs are few and far between. So how do you stay motivated when it's just you and your thoughts? Wouldn't it be nice to have someone alongside you, pushing you when you need it most? Well, running on your own can be tough to stay motivated, and I'm excited to introduce to you a new friend of mine, someone I know you're going to love, V. V is the coach in your ear, and she doesn't talk all stiff like a robot, but she talks like a real person. She'll give you advice, let you know how you're doing, and actually talk to you like a friend would, in an encouraging way, but still pushing you to do your best, not letting you off the hook when the going gets tough. But she also knows everything about you, so won't let you overtrain yourself either, which I know many of us are guilty of. You can find out more and enter to win your very own V at getv.com/runningforreal. That's getvi.com/running4real. All right, guys, just 4 more questions for you. Actually, the first one, Meghan, you might be able to skip over, but Bryon, I might have to ask you for something here. That's a unique nutrition tip. So, Bryon, what's your one there?
I have found that of the past year and a half, they've started making maple syrup packets and, 100 calories, just like gels. And I love those.
So it's literally just maple syrup in a little packet.
You got it.
Okay. All right. What is the name of it? Just so I can put a link in the
There's
show.
a number. I've used Untapped,
okay.
but there's a number of brands that make it.
All right. And next up for both of you, so Meghan, we'll start with you, a running for real moment, a moment that only runners will understand, and something that really brought home that you are a crazy runner.
Well, I had a really cool moment on a mountaintop this morning. I went up to climb up in the mountains, and there was a kind of a freak winter storm last night. The mountaintop had about 6 inches of snow on it, and the wind was just howling, and it was bitter cold, and most of the hikers on the mountain were turning around. I made it up to the top, tagged the summit, came back down. And there was a train of people in this sort of rocky, ledgy bit. And they together created this train, and they high-fived me because I was one of the few people that made it up to the summit and turned back down. So it was a moment where I felt like a crazy runner, but it was a moment that, it made me feel pretty proud.
Yeah, that's an awesome moment to have. Cool. And Bryon, what about you?
I'd have to think of the 50 or 100 or 200 times during last year's Hard Rock where I just sat down on a rock or just laid on my back in the last 40 miles because I had absolutely no energy. Mm-hmm. All my muscles were good, no injuries, but running had laid me so low that every couple minutes I would just stop and lay down, and I'd get myself back up after 10 or 20 seconds. But I remember telling the race director, Dale Garland, at the finish that I got a tattoo of alpine flowers on my shoulders that day.
You probably looked like you were just passing out and then getting up again.
Except I was doing it with a smile and never regretting it, and still thinking I was in the most beautiful place in the world and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Wow, that's awesome. At the same time, painful, but pretty cool. Thank you for sharing. Okay, and what about a high moment for each of you? Something that really meant a lot to you in your running career. So, Meghan?
I'd say winning the Marathon des Sables in 2013. I've run that race a couple of times. It's kind of a race that's near and dear to my heart. As Bryon elaborated on in the early part of the podcast, it's the race sort of where he and I cemented our relationship and decided to, join our lives from living across the country from each other to living in the same place. So there's a lot of reasons why I love the Marathon des Sables, and getting to be the winner of it in 2013 is something that I get to carry around and feel very proud of.
Yeah, for sure. And Bryon?
I think any of the last day of running the what was the Ultra Trail Gobi race and is now just Ultra Gobi, a 400-kilometer race, self-navigating across the Gobi Desert. And just that last day of still being able to run. I think I ran a good majority still of the last 30 or 40 kilometers. Wow. And that's such a superhuman feeling.
Yeah.
I wasn't moving fast, but just to still be able to go, it was just mind-blowing.
Yeah,
and empowering.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, and finally, what do you tell yourself when you're standing on the start line getting ready to go? So, Meghan?
Run smart.
Good advice.
Don't do anything in a moment that you won't be able to do in 10 minutes or 10 hours if it's a 10-hour race. Think sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be run smart, have fun. For me, those definitely go together. The more fun I can have, not being wild and crazy, but just if I can enjoy it. Over the last 2 Hard Rocks, I've probably taken 1,500 photos, just out there having fun, enjoying the moment, smiling with friends, giving people hugs along the way, my friends along the way in the race with me. Yeah, just enjoy it.
Definitely the way to do it. Okay, and finally, so I ask my guests to send me a photo, which I put in the show notes, of my guest standing in a power pose. So something you would do maybe if you're getting ready for a race, standing on the start line, to kind of build your confidence and kind of show yourself that you can do this. Are you both prepared to send us a power pose, preferably together as you are in the same place?
I think I can manage that. I have it, I think.
You have it already? Or you are going to take one?
No, I mean, I have the pose in my head.
You have the pose. Okay. All right. Meghan, are you good with that? Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the Running for Real podcast. This has been great to talk to you, hear about the people behind iRunFar. I definitely will put lots of links in the show notes for people to check out. And I look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
It was an honor to be with you today.
So much insight from those two people. You can only imagine how many tidbits of information they have picked up over the years from the elites, from researching, from articles, all kinds. If you haven't checked out iRunFar, make sure you do, because it really is such a good wealth of information. And, I love going there, and I'm not even an ultra or trail runner yet. but you will definitely enjoy it too. So make sure you go check out iRunFar if you have not already. I will put a link to everything we've talked about in the show notes, including the website and other things, at tinamuir.com/episode 21. So I want to thank you so much for listening today. It really means a lot to me that you have tuned in and checked out the Running for Real podcast. If you have enjoyed it, I hope you will leave a rating and or review. And next week, be ready for this one. This is a big one. It's going to be something that's going to change your whole perspective on running. It's going to make you rethink the way that you kind of approach your life and the challenges that you take. I have Rob Jones, who is a double amputee, and he is going to run 31 marathons in 31 places all around the US, in the UK and Toronto in 31 days. Yes, that is correct. I did not say that incorrectly. That is exactly what he's doing. And it's an amazing story. You are just going to love his attitude. So make sure you check that one out next week. And I hope you have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.